Hi everyone. Thank you so much for tuning back into the Mummy Means Business podcast. If you haven't listened to my trailer or any of my previous episodes, just a quick introduction. My name is Victoria Dele. I am a Christian, I am a wife, and I'm a mum to a beautiful little boy named Xavier. The reason why I started this podcast is because I wanted to create a platform where the everyday woman and the everyday mum can share their journey into the world of work, whether it be them starting a business or or being an entrepreneur, whether it be them working full time or whether they've decided to stay at home and raise the family. And today, I'm very excited to have a special guest with me. Her name is Inka Hurst, and she's part of a homeschooling organization which was originally founded in the US, which she brought it into the UK to create a community of mums who homeschool their children. Yinka is also a Christian. She's a wife and she's a mum to six beautiful children and is currently pastoring a church in Reading with her husband. So I actually know her as Auntie Inka, so I'm going to be referring to her as Auntie because I just feel like it's rude just for me to say Yinka. I think when I was introduced to you, someone said, "Yeah, this is Auntie Inka." So that's just Auntie's your first name,
A young
Yinka's your
middle
middle name.
namer.
Yes, young Auntie Inka. So we go to the same church. Well, that's when I first started to go church. She was a member of the congregation. So I've known her since I was about 15, 16 years old. And she's always been so warm and welcoming and very motherly and friendly. She's the type of woman that you can go to her for advice, just go to her for anything. She's just so approachable and easy to talk to and easy to conversate. Even though she's a little older than me, I've never ever felt I've never ever felt that. She's just been so warm and welcoming. So I was so happy when she agreed to join this podcast because I just think she's amazing.
Oh, you're so sweet.
No, of course you are. And yeah, so I just wanted to kind of pick your brains on this because obviously you're mum to six beautiful children, and you've been working on this organization for a number of years. But before that, like how old were you when you first had your first child, and were you working like in a full-time job at that stage?
Okay, first of all, I'd like to say thank you, Victoria, for inviting me
Of
to
course.
talk. I appreciate that. So I basically got married at 25, and I had my first child at 28. And yes, I was working. I was working for a pharmaceutical company called GlaxoSmithKline or GSK, and I worked as a scientist into new drugs. And yeah, so I was working. So I did break obviously for maternity and have my first child, but I had because it was a private sector, and the maternity they paid very well in terms of the maternity was full pay. So I had to then so you have to then go back for I think it was 6 months. So I went back for about 6, 7 months, and then that's when I decided to um, call it a day and go be at home and raise the children.
So was that a hard decision to make? Because obviously you must have, studied science in college, gone to university, studied this, and now this is a major company, GSK is obviously, it's a Fortune 100 company, so am I saying that correctly?
Yes, you are. I
Yes.
You are saying that correctly. It is the third. I think it's well at the time it was the third largest pharmaceutical company in the world. I'm not sure what it is now. I mean, I obviously there's few out there like Pfizer and can't remember the other big one, AstraZeneca. So I'm not sure where it lies now, but it's either second or third at the moment. So I know it was the third or the second when I was working there. It was a hard decision. It was a hard because I mean, I was earning a reasonable pay, and it was very comfortable living, and so it's not like I went part time. I literally stopped working, so there was no. We then came from a double income family to a single income family, and my husband at that time was working for the church. So our church is not a church of. He's not. it's not a church in LA. It's
Yeah.
a very humble church. So,
It's not a mega
and
church
so
or yeah.
no, no, not mega church. So there wasn't, the millions as a salary. So it was quite, yeah. So it was quite a dramatic cut. So, so I did struggle. I did struggle because you always think to yourself when you first get your job and you have children, oh, I want to give this to my children, give this to my children. But then you just realize that, you know what, it's all in God's hand. If God has called us for work, then we must do it diligently. And
Yeah.
so yes, it was a big decision to stop working and be at home. It wasn't
So
something I took lightly.
that was when you just had the one child.
Yes,
And since then, what do you think has kind of been the biggest lesson you've learned in motherhood so far? Because now you've been at it. You obviously your oldest daughter is how old now? She's a teenager, about
she's
13.
14. She just turned
14.
14 a couple of weeks ago. So I have a 14
Wow.
year old.
You have a 14-year-old as a daughter. That is crazy. You know, I actually remember when she was young. I remember when I think Mariah, when she was super young, when she was in nursery, and now they're all just
Yeah, Mariah's
tall.
12 now. Yeah, yeah,
That is
Mariah's taller than
crazy.
Ryan now, and they're soon gonna outgrow me.
So, what's been your biggest lesson so far that you've learned in motherhood?
Okay, so my biggest lesson so far I've learned in motherhood is not to take my children for granted because I realized that God has given me these children. These children belong to God. God has given me stewardship over these children, and so God loves them more than me. God knows them better than me because it's not like they're mine; they're He, so He knows them better than me. So when I do come up with tough situations, and I can always call to God for the answer because He knows them more than I do, and so when I use that in the sense of that when I know that, and so when I do come to these situations and I'm unsure, I will ask God like, what is going on here? And because God has given me these children, He'll give me the answer to situations around
Yeah.
them. Whether they be negative or positive. Should we go ahead with this? So I think my biggest thing I've learned in motherhood that these children do not belong to me.
That is really cool because it's something that I'm learning now as well. Like me and my husband, we constantly keep reminding ourselves that the child that we have is a blessing from God, and what is he's on loan to us from God, and we really really have to look after him because he's God's child. So
Absolutely.
it's good to know that because it makes you value your kids a lot more.
Yeah,
Obviously,
definitely.
did you always want a big family, like were all your children planned, or did you, were some of them kind of a surprise to you?
um, well, no, I did always want a big family, and no, they were all planned. But the last one, except for the last one, it was a lovely surprise. So that was a very big surprise, and so yeah, that was fun finding out.
Yeah, I remember when a pastor actually came. I think he did a sermon in our church, a revival, and he mentioned that you were pregnant for the sixth time, and everyone was confused. They were like, Wait, I think he's talking about the baby that he just had,
Yeah,
and
I know
maybe
it was
he
very
forgot."
it was very close. It was funny because the postman I remember him knocking at the door and he saw that I was pregnant. He goes, "You haven't had a baby yet?" I said, "No." He goes, but he was thinking I was still pregnant from Gyrus. I was like, "Are you talking about that baby?" He goes, "You're pregnant again." He's like, "But you just got pregnant." I was like, "No, this is another baby's." But no, but I'm grateful because I remember, when I found out I was pregnant, Gyrus was sleeping through the night. I was starting to kind of see light and day, having the energy and I remember thinking, Lord, really, I'm pregnant again, and but then that conviction hit me that there was a lady that I know and she just had a miscarriage and she's praying to get pregnant and have babies, and another one of my friends is desperate to have a baby, and I had to repent and say, Lord, I'm grateful, for blessing my womb. So that was a big learning curve for me, just to be grateful what God has given. And so yeah, so it was a surprise, and it was a lovely surprise. So I'm grateful, and I wouldn't
Yeah,
have other way. So
A
yes.
baby is always a blessing. And so did you what made you actually decide to homeschool your children? What made you kind of just go into that path and say, you know what, I want to take control of my children's education?
Yeah, so that was an interesting one because I wanted to homeschool before Kai and my oldest went into school, but I'd heard a few people doing it, but a lot of the few people I heard, they were kind of strange. I felt like they're a bit strange, and I was so it's kind of like it didn't really entice me. But I did want to, but I was thinking, those people I'm going to be hanging around with. No, so but then I remember when so she started school, she did like a year of reception and term. I remember as I just took it, I just thought, I just felt like the quality of our life, it was nothing to do with me being a Christian at that point. It was nothing whatsoever to do with me being a Christian. But it was the quality of life. The
Yeah.
quality of life was just rapidly diminishing. It was a rush in the morning, quick, eat your breakfast, quick, shoes on, get ready, let's go, let's quick, we're gonna be late for school. And then coming back, it was come on, homework, dinner, bath, bed. It was this routine that was just it's almost like sorry, I'm just gonna cough.
Oh no, it's fine.
Sorry,
Oh,
sorry. It's almost like you were a slave to this routine, and I just felt that I was getting the leftovers of my children. When they're tired and hungry, the teachers got the best part, and just the quality of life. And it was nothing to do with being a Christian at first. It was only when we became missionaries in America and we went and I found I really kind of dug into the spiritual side of things. The Bible says, train your children in the ways of the Lord, and they will not depart. I'm not saying that homeschooling is anything to do with salvation. If you homeschool, you don't homeschool. Salvation is from Christ and Christ alone. It's nothing to do with the schooling, but it definitely fits in with our um way of life. And yeah, I wouldn't have it any other way. And it's not easy. It's not like Little House on the Prairie. Some days are tough, but that's life, isn't it? Not everything's going to be easy. And once you get your head around that, it's fine.
it's interesting that you say that because there's a woman in our church that she actually was my teacher when I was in secondary school growing up, and she so happens to go to the same church as me. But she's also a teacher, and she was saying that she felt that she was spending more time with her kids in school than time with her actual kids at home. That she will,
Oh,
spend long days in school teaching the children there, and then to come home and having to work on homework. And the only time she had with her kids was just to put them to sleep or to make them dinner at night, but she didn't really get the quality time with them.
yeah.
Um, and then she just had to completely do a 180 and change her profession because she just valued the time with her kids more. And it's interesting to hear it on, the parent side to say that it was the same thing from your perspective that you felt that you didn't get the good times with your kids. You just got the times when they were tired at home and they wanted to go to bed rather than, the better times, which is why you decided to do this.
Yeah, no, definitely. I can definitely see where she's coming from.
But then how
Yeah.
did you go from that? So from homeschooling your own family to now, joining this organization and bringing, this homeschooling business, quote unquote, into the UK and running trainings for other families to do the same.
Well, I think, the truth is it originally because when I was doing it in America, I loved the program so much, and I could not homeschool without it. And when I found out I was coming back to the UK, basically I had no choice because I wanted to continue with this kind of education, and but there wasn't a community in the UK, and so I knew coming back to the UK, I would have to open a community. And so first, when I was in America, I made sure I got all the training I needed to come to the UK to open it. And obviously now, at first we started at my home, and now it's bigger, and there's tutors which are parents and have training and every year, and then we also meet as with I also meet with the tutors to do training and preparation for our science and art side of the curriculum. So it was quite a, a, a steep learning curve, to be honest with you, because I feel like I had to do everything very quickly because I knew I was coming back from the UK. So I had to make sure I got all the training I needed under my belt, then to bring it to the UK and to, you know, make it right, perform information meetings to try and, you know, get new families on board and get new families in the community. And it was a lot to do. It was a lot to do. So yeah, and so that's really how I went from just being part of the community in the UK, in America, and then kind of directing a community over here.
Was it challenging, kind of like doing, obviously if you're homeschooling just your children, it's just your kids, but now you have to do this trainings for other moms to do the same. Was that a challenge to kind of cross over from just you and your kids to now, being responsible for these families and their education too?
Yeah, no, you're right. It was, and because obviously you're thinking to yourself that they're relying on you because they look to you to have answers in terms of, you know, of how do I kind of make my child interested in this, and how do I do this, and what math curriculum. And so you do feel like you have to have the answers, and that part is challenging because really you are just another mother, you know, and but it's that's easily forgotten sometimes, especially when a new product comes out. Just like in anything, when a
Yeah.
new product comes out, people ask you questions and they want to know. So you have to kind of learn as well. You do learn a lot along the way, you know, and there's numerous of training I've listened to and everything, just trying to equip to myself to help other families and parents.
So, what do you think is the benefit with homeschooling versus public schooling? Because obviously, you mentioned that your first daughter originally was in public schooling for, a few years and you decided to homeschool her later on. What do you think are the benefits of homeschooling?
Um, that's a good question. So for me, the benefit was the time with my child. For one, I could spend this time in the day with my child, and also I could see where my child is at, because sometimes in school you forget that actually even when they're in school you are the teacher of your children. I think parents forget that, and I did forget that. You kind of think, well, the school, they're going to school every day, but you know, sometimes you might not even be aware of where your children lack in their education. So with
Yeah.
homeschooling, you definitely know the answer to that. You know where your children lack. You know, so I'm gonna cough. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, it's
You
fine.
know the way your children learn. Children learn so differently. Each of my children learn really differently. I'll give you an example. So Mariah learnt to read between 3 and 4 before she would have started any kind of school. But like Tabitha, she used to go to a speech therapist, so she had difficulty pronouncing certain words, you know, ones that come from the front of the mouth, ones that come from the back of the mouth. And and in my head, I'm like, what is the point of me teaching her to read these sounds if she can't make these sounds? So I
Yeah.
didn't teach her to read, and so she only learned to read about a year and a half ago. So she was about between 7 and 8, and that's a big difference. 3 and 4, 7 and 8. But these children are so different, you know. If they were in school, Mariah would have been fine in that instant, but Tabitha would have, you know, been labelled that she's behind, should have been taken out of school for special lessons. And so the beauty of it is that Tabitha didn't even know. She just start, you know, she didn't know that, okay, I'm starting that. You know, I just would just read to her, and when she was ready, then we started to learn to read. You know, and so the beauty is that you're in control of your child's education, and you know what they're reading, you know what they're working on. I think, and also I think with the curriculum I use, classical conversations, they are learning to learning to teach themselves. I think that's important. Rather than everything in the way in school it's been put on the plate for you, they're learning to find resources and to learn to look things up, learn to ask the right questions. And and that's something I'm able to put in their education, you know, because I'm the one at the moment who's in charge of it. So
It's interesting that you say that because I grew up in Nigeria and I was there until I was about 9 years old. And the schooling there is almost similar to what you're mentioning in homeschooling because they really cater to your levels. They don't, in Nigeria, they don't push you forward to go on to the next year if they don't feel like you're ready. They make sure that you're at a good stage before they bring you forward, and if you are more advanced than where you currently are, then they challenge you by putting you with people who are of the same level, which I think is something that like the UK curriculum or the UK schooling, they don't do that. Like they'll push you forward, even though you might not be ready. I've had times that I've been in classrooms with, and I have no idea what is going on, and it comes to exams, and I don't do well, and I just get pushed onto the next year, and then it becomes even harder. And I'm like, if I'm not getting what's happening in the year below, what makes you think I'm gonna get what's happening in the year above?
Yeah, yeah.
So it's almost a pro actually. It's a really good benefit that you're actually saying, I'm watching my children, seeing what their strengths are, and really nurturing those strengths. And then the bits where they lack, I'm making sure that I give extra attention, extra time so that they can catch up and be of the same level.
Definitely, you've got it in one. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
So,
And the real,
sorry,
sorry,
go on.
I was going to say the reality that the ratio is far better in homeschooling because in school it's if you've got a class assistant, it's 1 to 15, or if you haven't, it's 1 to 30. Whereas obviously at home the ratio is a lot more smaller, so they're getting a lot more attention.
Yeah. So how did you kind of make this into a business? If I were to use that word, like how did you? What were the key steps that you kind of had to take? Because I'm sure that it wasn't as easy as just bringing and the organization to the UK. Like, what were the steps that you had to take to kind of turn this into something bigger?
Well, I think the first step was to um, try and drum up, what's the word? Um, I'm trying to think, trying to drum up interest. So I had to hold information meetings where I would go to people's houses or they'd come to mine, and I would tell them about the program, tell them how it works and everything. Because the thing is, the community can't work with no other families. It can't just work with just my family. I mean, it'd be a community, but it'd just be my family. So it works obviously with involving other families, and so that was the key thing first to do that. And once that you got those families, it was maybe finding a building to meet in. At the first year, we did meet in my house, but we outgrew that. So then I had to look for venues to use, to to do this community. And that was very hard because um, the UK, UK venues in terms of church buildings and local authority buildings are quite expensive. They charge per hour, and we wanted it for the whole day. So and we have to split the cost between the different families. Obviously, at first, there's not as many families, so that was really challenging. Trying to find a venue, but in the end, we went to so every year we kind of our venue literally changed because situations change, and but now we're in a venue where they really do like us and like having a Christian community there, and so it's been a blessing, and it's not as been as expensive as you know it was first thought to. So, and also just being organized as well. I think a key step is you have to be organized, and as a mother it's easy to say that, but you've got other things. You're not just you're running this out of your home. You've got your home, you've got your husband, you've got your children, and you have ultimately you have your relationship with God. So you have to have time to pray, to read your Bible, everything. So organization is a key as well, especially for a mother, because I think mothers can be overwhelmed when things are not in place. "Oh, I haven't done this, I haven't done that." So the key is organisation, where you're going to get to this, not today, maybe tomorrow, but just knowing what you need to do. And obviously, because obviously now this community had grown, and I guess in a sense like a business, but it's not a business, and I don't make business, huge money or anything from it. But where other people are involved in this exchange of money, so I had to sort the bank out in terms of I had to do a separate account just for the community where people pay the tuition fees in there, and then I pay that to the tutors. So yeah, so I had to make it separate from our banking and our accounts. And so yeah, and I think another key step which people really do forget is to get help when you can. To get help, don't do this alone. Get help when you can. I had a friend that helped me with the banking side because she worked in a bank. So she got me an appointment, and I got an account for the homeschooling community. And then I have another friend that helps me collect up the money for the facility fee, and for her job, she does spreadsheets and stuff, and so she did this spreadsheet of people who paid their facility fee, and she keeps on top of that for me, and that helps. And so I definitely think it's not good to be alone in your business and do it, because it's nice to have people that you can rely on and people you can help. And I would say never be scared to ask for help from people around you.
That is a really really good tip because obviously me, I find myself I find it hard to ask for help, and I don't mean to, but I just feel like I don't want to be a burden onto other people. And also I'm like a perfectionist, so I like things done a certain way. So I feel like if I ask for help, I don't want to be that person that's like, yeah, but I need you to do exactly the way I would do it almost. So even when I first had Xavier, and in the first few weeks when he was born, my husband went back to work. My mum had stayed with me for 2 weeks already, so she had taken 2 weeks off work and stayed with me, and she had to go back to work. And I remember there was like 3 days in a row, and I didn't sleep at all. Yeah, Xavier had really bad gas, but I had no idea that it was gas at the moment. I just thought he's just not sleeping. I also had some troubles breastfeeding and latching on. But when my mum was around for that first 2 weeks, it was amazing. And then once everyone left, like I was struggling so much, but I just felt bad asking someone to come back and help me. Like my mum even offered to, come back and stayed with me. My husband saw how like I literally was like a zombie for a few days, and I just wasn't myself, and he literally called my mum and just said, ignore what she says. Even if she says she doesn't need help, just go over there, like she will appreciate it. And literally I appreciated it so much. She came over and I was able to
Oh,
sleep. And I live quite far from her, so for her to, she even took the train, and she was like, yeah, I took the train. Oh, and she took an extra week off just to look after me. And it's like I was, even in that state, I was still so stubborn to ask for help. It had to be my husband that saw me, and he was like, you actually need this, and he had to go and call. So it's a really good tip, especially for business. You're only gonna grow. You can't. There's only so much you can do as a business owner or an entrepreneur with just two hands. The more hands you have, the bigger you can take it, and that's something that I've learned as well this year.
and generally, even in business itself, if you are taking a business to a level that you desire to take, say a bit, high level, you need people to help you. You can't, there will be people, there'll be employees, and so you have to be able to help. Because really, when you ask for help, you're not just asking for help. You're directing people that that have got these qualities to help you in these arenas. So that all helps in business.
Yeah, that is definitely true. But what role did your husband play in all of this? Was it obviously you went to him and said this is a new venture that I want to go into? Was he kind of completely supportive and helping you, especially with with your children as well?
Yeah, I mean, the thing that what was good about my husband is that when I did say about homeschooling, he really wanted the children. Which was surprised because obviously he's not like he was homeschooled himself, but because you get a lot of homeschool mothers that their husbands are not really fully on board. They're almost like they're doing a trial, but my husband was fully on board, and he would take the in a physical role. So I think that role, just being on board, is a role in itself, a mental role that my husband's behind me, because some mothers do it and their husbands are not 100% behind you, but they've kind of you know just given them, okay, you have a go and see what this
Yeah.
leads to. And so that was a mental role. But a physical role, he takes the children on a lot of their activities, their gymnastics, their swimming, and everything, he'll take them on a lot of their activities, and that helps a lot because then I don't have to leave the home. I can do other things and or work on something else with a different child, and so yeah, and and there's a couple of times when I've said, oh, they've asked me to do this in terms of oversee the UK or the UK communities, and I did ask him, and he said, well, and he asked, do you think you'll be able to do it because you're director of this community and it's quite a lot. And so we spoke about it. So just having him there as a support and someone to talk to um, is a role that is very important. You know.
It's interesting that you say that because, like, homeschooling, well, I haven't really thought about schooling for Xavier at all. I even need to think about nursery for him for when I go back to work because I'm currently on maternity leave. But, like, homeschooling is when it's something that is mostly the woman who thinks of this. You never hear of a man saying, "Yeah, I really want to homeschool my children when I have kids." So it's always like a conversation that if I were to go into, I just can't, and I can never expect to. I don't know what my husband will say. Like I can't even like imagine what he'll say because I don't think he'll even know what it consists of. So did you have to almost like educate your husband about what homeschooling is, or was it just kind of did he just get it from the beginning?
That is a brilliant question, and my husband is I think he just trusted in me, but most husbands would want to know. They will. I mean, I've got friends, and their husband, says, "Well, what does this mean for this, and what does this mean for this?" And information meetings they come, but I think, I mean, I don't know if it's because he predominantly schooled in the Caribbean, so obviously I was brought up in the UK. Maybe he just thinks I would know more than he would know, and so he just trusted me, with it, and that's not to say that if a husband doesn't trust you with it, it's not. It just wasn't. Some husbands they just say, okay, well, whatever you feel, yeah, let's do it. And he was pretty much like that. I guess he just thought to himself, that's not his area anyway,
Yeah.
so I'll leave you to it. But I think it may be different from maybe a husband that is brought up in the UK and has gone to school in the UK because they're aware of the education system in the UK, and so they will probably need to. Because I've had many information meetings where mothers said, "Oh, because there's a CD that I give to new parents as well," and I said, "I'm going to give that to my husband to listen to just for him to understand it better." I get that a lot. Or I get, oh, if my husband have only heard that, maybe he would have understood it better. So yeah, so a lot of husbands they do want to understand and know what this really means because a lot of them don't. So, but with my husband, he was okay. He was just homeschool, okay, school at home. Yep, that's good. He did. I think he was just scared because of all the things that are coming up in schools. In terms of books and
Yeah.
terms of the sex education,
Yeah.
everything. So he was just, yep, go for it, type of thing.
It's like, yeah, do it. So, but how do you kind of, how do you manage or balance your time between your children, between your church, and now between this homeschooling community that you're creating? How do you manage all of that?
I think the first one is by the absolute grace of God. I tell you, Victoria, it is. But so yeah, I know everyone says I got 6 children, and I do, and so it is very busy and everything. But I think when you have one child, it's hard, and then when you have two child, now when you have one child, it's like, oh wow. When you have two children, it's like, oh gosh, this is hard because obviously you can't just sleep when you want when the baby sleeps because you've got a toddler running around. But when you go to 3 children, you're already getting up to feed that toddler, and so they literally just fit in, and then the fourth child fits in, and the fifth just fits in, and Victoria's laughing.
And then the sixth fits in, and then the seventh fits in, and before you know it, I was watching a show of a woman who had 21 kids,
Yeah, wow.
and it didn't even phase her.
Yeah, I think you learn to not hear things. You learn, and it's funny because the real blessing really comes after 2 children. Because people stop at two because they think it's just too difficult. Because when you have 3 kids, they just fit in, and then the older ones start helping out. So the blessing actually comes when you have more than 2 children. When you have more children, because they just help out. They know their roles. When I go out with just me and the baby, I feel like a first time mum again. I've got to take the car seat out. I've got to hold the bag. When I'm out with the rest of them, I'm like, okay, Kai, you take the baby bag. Mariah, you take the Jairus, hold his hand, hold Zena's hand. Um, Tabitha, you take the lunch bag. Everyone's got their roles to play, and it's so smooth, And so the real blessing is when you have more than two, really, and then you have a few more. That's when you see the real blessing. And so I always told the children, I couldn't do this without you, and they help. They do, because the thing is, you train your children to help, and also they see that mummy needs help. They see that, oh, mummy's struggling, mummy needs help. So most children would help. I mean, the amount of times my girls have come in and said, oh, mummy, would you like us to bring breakfast up for you in bed? Because they might have heard the baby in the night, or they might have just heard footsteps. And it's a blessing, that they can, be so sensitive to that. And church is always fun. I think it's easier to balance it all, because church, obviously, I love being in church. I love being in the house of God. So do the children, and it's again, just getting it ready for church, getting to church, and activities in church. Now the children are older, like they join in with the youth group and everything. So it just works itself out, and it is by the grace of God. But you do have to be careful not to get burnt out. There's times when you just have to say to yourself, I need to take a rest. Look, I'll give you an example. A couple of weeks ago, we're having people over pretty much every week. We're still very new to congregation. It's been just over 2 years. And then I had to say, you know what? I'm not going to have anyone over this Sunday because I just need to rest. So you have to be true to yourself. You can't be superwoman. You have to, because you will get burnt out, and sometimes you just need to rest. And so it's a blessing to know that, and it's a blessing to know that it's okay to rest. It's okay that you can't keep going 24 hours a day. You're not Superwoman, you're not Wonder Woman, you're not any of the women. You're a mother, you know, and so rest. And so I think that's the key there as well,
I
to
think
knowing to rest.
a big family is something I'm looking forward to as well. Like even
Yay!
hearing you speak about, one child is helping you with this, the other is kind of getting you food. And it's just like that's just the dream almost. Like I want a big family. I only grew up with my sister. I had a older brother as well, but he passed away quite young. And I've always had the desire of like coming home to like a noisy, messy house with like all your kids running to you and just like, mummy, like come, like wanting to come and say hi to you. Like that's just been a desire of mine. Or like for Christmas when I'm older, all my kids coming over to to see me on Christmas Day with their kids, and I have all my like it's just something that's been a desire of mine. And it's good to hear that, I think 2 kids has always been like what my husband wants. He said 2 kids maximum. I want to be able to spend, enough time with them individually, so I don't want more than two. So I'm going to play this podcast to him to tell him that the blessing comes after two.
Yes, amen.
Like after two, after three, after four, that's when, it's easier. So that's definitely, I'm going to play that to him. But yeah, it's been so great to have you on this podcast. And I thank you so much for taking the time out. People don't actually know this, but we recorded this podcast earlier and we had a really good conversation, finished it, and it just didn't record. So we had to re-record it. And I feel like we actually got a lot more interesting bits from this second round.
Yeah. Some parts felt like deja vu, but others it was good. It was good. And I got
Yeah.
to speak to you again, Victoria.
Of course. So just one more question. If you had to give an advice to any mum who wants to either homeschool their kids or they want to, start a community like you have, what advice would you give them?
Oh, what advice would I give them? Um, I'd give them I'd let them know that it may not always be easy in the terms of starting up, finding a venue, and that kind of thing when you get families together. But don't give up. And I mean, there's many times when we just didn't know where we were meeting, for the new academic year. Literally, it was be the summer, and we're starting in September. And I would just pray, and I'd get the parents to pray, and and it would all work out. And even if your mum is not starting a homeschool or homeschool community, even in just business in general, keep God first and pray about everything, because people don't realize that God is into that. He's into the every detail of your life. I remember when you read through Genesis, and it speaks of the Ark of the Covenant and the artists that came in. It says that God gave them even more skill, blessed them with more skill. So God is blessing an artist with even more skill, for the little intricate details. God is interested in intricate details, and just putting God first and just praying and like you're doing this podcast, so I'll be like, Lord, I don't know what this podcast can do, but use it to glorify your name, use it to bless other mothers, use it to encourage other mothers. These are the things you need to do, but putting God first, in everything you do, because as women and mothers, we get so consumed and so busy, and we even become, you know, um, we become a Martha and not a Mary, and so we want to be Mary, we want to be at the feet of Jesus in everything we do. And so yeah, so my advice would just be, you know, you know, just get some real good, strong friends behind you that can encourage you the right way. And you can even, if you're some of you are listening to this, think, I'd love to homeschool my children. I'd love to start a community because there's none around me. Go onto Classical Conversations website. Email me. Anything that I can do to help anyone. In any arena like that. But I would say if it's a passion, you keep that passion going, and don't let discouragement get in your way with anything. And yeah, and that's the advice I would give. Just do what you want to do, and just put God there first, and don't you worry, let God do what
All the
needs to be
worrying for
done.
you.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, and just be the best mom and the best Christian, the best wife you can be. And if you are a single mum, just ask God for wisdom, and ask God, how can I do this? And God will show you a way. God sees our hearts, and God loves the widows, the fatherless children, fatherless children. So God is into that. So God will give you wisdom. God will give you ways you can do a business, or you can do homeschooling, or you can open a community, anything like that. So yeah.
That's a great way to end this podcast.
Oh,
It's been really great talking to you again. But
you. Thank you for having me.
of course, and yeah, if you'd like to hear more, make sure you subscribe to the Mummy Means Business podcast. You can search for Mummy Means Business on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, on SoundCloud, or on Podbean, where you can access all of our episodes. We'll be speaking to a lot more mums who also are in business or entrepreneur or working. So make sure you tune in and you listen to all the other episodes. And if you'd like to see my face, feel free to check out my Instagram at victoria.dele. And yeah, if you want to access Auntie Inka, you want to speak to her about any homeschooling, just leave a comment below and I'll make sure to kind of link both of you together. Maybe I can share your email to any individual if that's okay, Auntie Inka.
Fine, that's
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah. Cool. Well, thank you so much again. And yeah, I'll see you next time. Bye.